Elijah meets with Obadiah, and Obadiah tells him, you know what? The king is looking for you. And Elijah says, I want to meet the king, but at Mount Horeb. So tell the king to come with the gods of Asherah and the gods of Baal, so that we can see the Lord who can answer prayers. And we remember what happened at Mount Horeb, that eventually it is God who answered prayers, but those gods of Baal and Asherah did not do it. And rain came
Prof,
down. Yes?
the slides are not moving, are they?
No, I'm not moving the slide at this point,
Oh,
Levered. And Elijah runs away. And I want us to think about the slide now that is there, that is 1 Kings 19:4. For he himself went a day's journey, that is Elijah, into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush and sat down under that tree and prayed that he might die. He said, I have had enough, Lord. Take away my life. I am no better than my ancestors. And he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. This man of God, who have seen the power and the might and the hand of the Lord at Mount Horeb, but at this moment he is defeated. And that is what we are looking at. Moments when we can feel defeated as a people. You can feel defeated as a son, or even as a mother, or even as a father, or even as a wife. Any person can have the challenges of mental health. Mental health in Kenya has been an issue of concern, and it is estimated that 6 million Kenyans suffer from common mental conditions. Those may include depression, or even those that are abusing substances or depending on substances, or even those that are having stress and anxiety. And the World Health Organization annual report in 2017 ranked Kenya as the 6th among the African countries with the highest rates of depression. So, should the church be concerned? And we can say, yes, the church should be concerned. Because even in our churches, we are experiencing challenges of people who are struggling with mental health conditions. Now, when you look at the rates of suicide in Kenya, between the year 2006 and 2017, again, we are able to appreciate the preference of mental health challenges in our country. The data refutes that the lowest incidents of suicide were recorded in 2010. And there were 75 cases. Why? Because during that period of time, people were hopeful. So when people have hope, then the incidents of suicide and mental health are much lower. Again, the incidents of suicide were most highest in the year 2007, 2013, and 2017. Why? Because those were the periods when campaigns were happening. And during those moments of time, people are stressed. And therefore, there were the highest suicide rates during those periods. Again, the World Population Review ranks Kenya at position 114 out of 175 countries with the highest suicide rate. So we have 6.5 people out of 100 people who commit suicide in Kenya, according to World Health Organization. And therefore, we need to be very concerned. But what are the characteristics of good mental health? When can we know that we are okay? It is when you're feeling good about yourself, when you feel comfortable with other people. You're not having the stresses and the strains of relating with other people. When you are able to meet the demands of life, and when you express emotions in healthy ways. Lefred took you through emotional maturity in another session. When one is able to express emotions in healthy ways, that person is regarded as mentally healthy. When one is optimistic, and when you're using healthy skills, like you're managing your stress and you're making your decisions without piling issues that are not resolved,
I think, Mchungaji, we are losing our facilitator. And maybe
Yes, we could have a problem.
maybe as Mchungaji gets in touch with her, we can continue even looking at whether there are concerns, questions, or things or areas that we may need her to come and respond to. Today, like you've heard, we are talking about mental health. And with the data that she has provided, you realize that this is an area of concern. I never thought that it is an issue when anytime we are approaching an election year. But from the statistics, we have heard that during those times, there are higher rates of even suicide. And that tells us that indeed we need to discuss this topic and many others that are going to help our people, even in such times like this. So mental health is an issue. It's indeed a problem and something that needs to be discussed. Esther Nduta, kindly mute. And I can see Professor is back. So karibu sana, Professor, so that we carry on. And we had lost your PPT. So if we can have the presentation again as we carry on, that would be good. Karibu.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, my internet failed me. I want us to think about how can we know that someone is not mentally okay? And I would want us to interact on that. How do you know that someone is not mentally okay? In our homes, in our workplaces, how would you be able to identify that individual who is not okay? You can unmute yourself and respond to that. How would you know What are the signs that would tell you that someone is not okay? Just unmute yourself and answer so that we can interact with each other. How would you know that someone is not okay? A member of your household is not okay? How can you know?
Becomes with a drone, not communicating.
Thank you so much, Moirore. Someone becomes withdrawn, and then you know this person is not okay. What else do you see?
Sometimes they are very irritable. Small things, they just irritate them and, they start doing weird things.
Right? They start doing weird things. What are those weird things that they do, Rosemary?
You realize maybe sometimes, sleeping becomes a problem, shouting, even because of small things. Yeah.
Yeah, they may be shouting and they are very irritable. Yes, then you can know this person is not okay. Recharged. Again, unmute yourself and answer.
Sorry, madam, can you please pardon that question?
Right, I'm asking, how would you know that a family member or even a friend is not well mentally? What is it that you're going to see?
Okay, one, a family member may engage in drugs.
Right, a family member may?
Engage in using drugs.
Repeat that again, Mwangi.
A family member
Yeah, a family member may engage in
engage in
use of drugs. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's very clear. They may engage in the use of drugs. Something else, the last person to
Professor,
tell us.
there is also behavioral change where you say you find that people change their behavior. One who was organized, they stop being organized, they are dirty, and they are just there. Somebody changes all of a sudden. Thank you.
We also have someone who is saying at the chat session that one becomes very angry. They become angry very fast.
Yes, they can become angry very fast because now they are not themselves. This individual is not himself, is not the person that you knew before. They have changed, or the individual has changed, and that is why you are seeing that now they are having a changed behavior, a changed way of looking at things. So then, there are characteristics of poor mental health. Someone who is not able to share their own feelings, and someone who is becoming very negative. They become pessimistic, and someone who is not able to accept change. That person has poor mental health. And at the same time, a person who is not able to control their own behaviors, and a person who is ignoring problems, and a person who is allowing stress to control him or her, and someone who is blaming other people, not taking responsibility of what he feels and what he thinks and what he does. And at the same time, a person who is very aggressive and passive, and a person who is obviously depressed, and a person who is learning from one conflict to the other, and a person who is is closed-minded, and a person who is running away from groups. Now, we have different kinds of mental disorders. And when we talk about a mental disorder, we are talking about an illness of the mind. And that illness of the mind affects our thinking, our feeling, and our behaviors, preventing us as people from leading a happy and healthy and productive life. So this individual is unhappy. This individual is not feeling like they are living that productive life as he or she would want. And so we need to think about what are the causes of the mental illnesses, the many types of mental illnesses. It can be inherited, and that is why even when people come with mental health challenges to us as counseling psychologists or even clinical psychologists or even other forms of psychologists, when they come to us, we would want to ask ourselves, are there other people in your family who have this kind of mental disorder or other mental disorders? Again, another cause of mental illnesses is negative life experiences. Have you gone through a traumatic incident? Were you having finances, but now the finances are down because of the pandemic that we are having at this period of time? Have you closed down your business? That may be a traumatic incident, or even getting raped, or even going through a medical condition that you're not able to control. That can be traumatic for particular individuals. Or even you've been exposed to some environmental issues or even environmental exposures like viruses and toxins or even alcohol or drugs. Another cause of mental illness is when the brain changes because of hormonal imbalances. For one to be cured, there is need to understand the cause of the mental illnesses. We've been going through a prolonged negative life experience, COVID-19, and it has brought to us as a people unmatched economic decline, businesses going down, loss of income, losing employment. At the same time, people have been taken through quarantine measures, and people may not be able to handle the basics or even pay bills or even attend to the financial obligations, even taking care of their own children. And therefore, there is a considerable degree of fear and worry and concern for a very long period of time. When we are talking about mental disorders, then there is imbalance in the brain. The brain changes because the brain has a lot of functions, whether it is the thinking or it is solving issues, or it is even storage of information, that is memory, or even speech or hearing, or even seeing. So when the brain is affected, then there are many other things that get affected in ourselves as people. I want to take you through different mental disorders so that you can be able to appreciate that when people are having mental disorders, there is a whole range of those mental disorders that they may be struggling with. For example, anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorder may be that time when you're feeling you're panicking. You're panicking. You're not understanding the reason as to why you're panicking, but there you are. Or even impulse control disorders. And I'm going to explain that also. Or even eating disorders. You're not able to eat, or you are eating too much. Or even mood disorders. Or even the schizophrenia. Or the personality disorders. Or the addictions. And the post-traumatic stress disorder. Let me take you through each one of them. The anxiety disorders. It is a condition in which there is real or imagined fears. And people with anxiety disorders, they try to avoid situations that make them to be anxious. We talk about generalized anxiety disorder. This is when you don't know what is making you to be anxious, but you are anxious, but you can't put a finger to the reason as to why you are anxious. Or even when you have what we call obsessive compulsive disorder. You are obsessing over something. Like even your children, you are fearful that your children are going to be harmed or your child is going to be harmed. That we call it an obsession. And an obsession you're not able to control. You're just finding yourself very anxious. Or even when you have panic disorder, that you're going through a panic disorder, you're panicking, you're not able to breathe very well, and you cannot understand the reason as to why that is happening. Or maybe you understand because you know the incidents that you've been going through. And then we have the post-traumatic stress disorder. You go through a difficulty at one time, say like sexual molestation or being stolen from by some thieves. And then after some time, even 5 years after that, you are still panicking. You are still remembering that incident. And you're very fearful of some places because you fear that you're going to be stolen from if you pass in some areas or in some places. So anxiety disorders. And some of us can be going through anxiety disorders perpetually, that throughout your life, you know that you've been having different kinds of anxieties. Phobias are fears, that you have different kinds of fears. They can be fears regarding places, or fear of people, or fear of things, or fear of germs, many kinds of fears that you can have. So then, it is important to know what is giving you difficulty. When one is going through impulse control disorders, there are those that light fires. You light fires anywhere, and you have a compassion of doing that, or even a compassion of stealing all the time. You go to a supermarket and you are stealing even things that are not important. We call that kleptomania. Or even cutting yourself. Pyromania is lighting fires. And you do that compulsively because you'd want to control yourself. That is the reason as to why you are writing fires, or even excessive gabbling. And we know people who gabble a lot, or even compulsive shopping, going to shop things that you do not require. That in essence, we call it impulse control disorder, and it is still a mental health problem that one is going through. Then we have the mood disorders. And the mood disorders or mood problems, this is the condition that we mostly know. It is an illness involving mood extremes. In the morning, you may be very happy, but in the evening, you may be very unhappy, meaning that your moods are shifting from being very happy to being very unhappy. So we have types of mood disorders. Like the bipolar is the one that I have explained, where you have a high and you have a low. Or even depression, where you're feeling raw. You don't want to come out of your house, or you don't want to bathe, you don't want to cook, you don't want to dress, you do not want to organize things. You're feeling like you don't want to do anything. Or even the mood disorders that are very seasonal. There are periods of time, like you hear people saying during the month of July that many people will have depression. That is a seasonal mood disorder. A seasonal mood disorder. When one is depressed, one may be very sad, like we were saying, or withdraw from other family members, or even you are not performing very well in your studies, or even changing in eating or even sleeping patterns. You are only sleeping 2 hours in a night, and within a week, you find yourself like there are even nights when you're not sleeping at all. Or even loss of weight or gaining weight, or having unresolved grief and taking substances. You may be taking marijuana, or taking alcohol, or taking other forms of drugs of abuse. A person who is depressed will feel dejected, or feel hopeless, or have irritability, like we said, or inability to be happy. And this is a person who requires to be supported or to be assisted so that she or he can snap out of the depression that one is going through. Now, when you have a bipolar depressive disorder, there are times you are maniac, when you are high and having a lot of energy and can be able to do a lot. But then there comes a time when you get depressed and you have low energy, you're feeling worthless at that time, you have difficulty concentrating, you're not sleeping very well, you're losing interest, and you have recurrent thoughts of death and suicide. Now, we need to understand that as family members so that we can help this individual to be able to understand that he or she is requiring support. I would want us to talk a little bit about how do you detect that somebody is suicidal? How would you know that an individual now is not only depressed, but now he or she is tending to be suicidal. How would you know? You can unmute yourself and talk. How would you know that somebody is now suicidal? Right? How would you know? Just unmute yourself and tell us how you can know that one is suicidal.
Thank you, Mwalim. Maybe I can try.
Yes.
Somebody knows someone is suicidal. Maybe by the way they are talking, somebody may be saying something like, they don't feel like they have a reason to live anymore. So their talk can tell you.
Yeah, their talk is going to tell you that this individual is suicidal because maybe this individual is hopeless. They are not seeing the need of living anymore. Something else that you can pick, that there are certain things that the individual is going to say, and it's going to communicate that this individual is hopeless. Something else?
Yes, and Professor, we have two on the chat section. One is saying that sometimes they verbalize it, and another one is saying that they also talk about death oftenly.
Yeah, yes, it is very true. They can talk about death many times, or they can verbalize in other different ways that indeed they are not seeing the need of living anymore. Someone else, Aris, do you want to say something? Your mic is unmuted. Right, someone else? How do you know?
Someone has also written attempted suicide.
Right? If this person is going to attempt to commit suicide, maybe has bought medication or even a rope, and you realize that this individual indeed wanted to commit suicide, even jumping on the road when a vehicle is passing. That means that this person is looking for death or would want another person to kill him or her. Something else that can tell you that this individual is not okay, they are suicidal.
Also, with the technology we have, you get some people with their profile messages. They change messages on daily basis, and the messages they are changing, you can see all of them. They are talking about death. They are talking about life being meaningless, or you get pieces of papers they are dropping almost everywhere about how life has become meaningless and all that. So there are so many messages they keep writing about life being meaningless.
Yes, they communicate. Yes. Someone else? Continue on.
Wanting to be alone.
Yeah, someone withdrawing and wanting to be alone, that is a signal that this individual may be suicidal. But again, we are saying communicating and even actions that point to the fact that this individual may want to commit suicide. And many a times in our families, we quarrel them. We ask them what they are doing. We address them in ways that are very aggressive. Remember, this is an individual who is sick. This is an individual who is needing understanding from us as family members, or us within the community, or even within our workplaces where we are, or even in the neighborhood, so that we address them in ways that seek to understand them, so that we can either refer them to a psychiatrist, or even to counseling psychologists for them to be attended to, because when it gets to the level of being suicidal, then we say that this has reached to a clinical stage. When the condition is in a clinical stage, then this individual will require attention or will require support, not only from the family, but even from the doctors and also from the counseling psychologists or even other psychologists. So we need to listen to them. We need to understand them so that we can give them the help and the support that they require for them to be well, or for them to get the support they require. So when depression is not treated, it will get to a level of one becoming suicidal. And there are those warning signs that we need to check. One, giving away prized possessions. Like maybe an individual, it can be your brother or your sister or another family member who is giving away items she or he loved, or even those feelings of despair and hopelessness, threatening to hurt oneself, or even preoccupation with death all the time, like what we have said, lighting those messages. Then there are eating disorders, which is another mental health condition. When one is eating too much, one may get too fat. That means you have bulimia, what we call bulimia, or you're not eating, meaning you become anorexic. So when people are not eating well, then we need to ask ourselves, what is the reason that is making the individuals not eat well? Something else that is a pointer to mental health issues are conduct disorders. People who are bullying others, starting fights, being cruel and damaging property, or even being deceitful, or even taking alcohol and other forms or other types of drugs of abuse. Then we have the schizophrenia. And this is the one that I am going to be finalizing with in this particular session. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder where a person is losing contact with the reality. This person is not connecting very well with the reality. Even when the individual is talking, this individual is not able to reason out in ways that are objective. The individual is not objective and is not able to relate with the reality or has lost touch with the reality. The individual will say how much they are going to do or to pass or to do certain things, but this individual is not looking into, I need 1, 2, 3. I need to study for me to be able to pass. But the individual is saying, I'm going to pass, I'm going to do very well, but they are not working hard in order to be there. And therefore, we can see that this person has a problem, and a problem that needs to be attended to. We have looked at different types of mental conditions, whether it is depression, or it is schizophrenia, or it is bipolar condition, or it is the impulse obsessive conditions that we talked about. All of them they communicate that one is not well. Now, when one is going through a mental health issue, then this individual needs to be taken care of or even to be helped to see how he or she can take care of herself. One of the things that we can do as family members is to listen to this individual and to appreciate the struggles that this individual may be going through, and to help them to isolate the challenges that they can be able to attend to and the challenges they may need assistance to attend to. And we can help those individuals to be able to attend to issues that are disturbing them, so that this individual can come out of the struggle and the challenge that he or she is going through. But if the mental health condition has gone to the extreme level, like for example, that one is taking substances of abuse and has gotten to the dependency level, that would mean that this person will need to be submitted to a counselor or even to be rehabilitated or taken to a rehabilitation, so that within the rehabilitation environment, this individual can be treated. So then we cannot ignore when people are having challenges of mental health. We need to attend to them and we need to listen to them so that we can help them to figure out the challenges they are going through and the kind of strategies they need to employ for them to be well again. I am coming to the end of my presentation in terms of the different conditions, mental health conditions that I wanted to talk about in this session. And so I am opening the session now to any questions that we may have, or even any comment that we may have.
Thank you very much. Evangelist, you can moderate that.
That's fine, Chungaji. Right, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor, for the wonderful presentation. That was very profound and very clear. Members, as you've heard, for the remaining few minutes, we want to interact with our guest speaker. And like we have always done, we have a chat section where you can write down your comment, your question, because we may not be able to see all the hands that are in the meeting tonight. Share with us your views on the session that we've had, and also other areas that you feel that you'd want us to go deeper. And I think our guest speaker is ready to respond to the questions that we have. Irene Mwangi, thank you so much. You're asking a question: what happens when the one with a mental condition does not want help? I think, Professor, you can respond to that as we wait for other question on the chat section.
Many a times that is what happens, that the one with the mental condition does not seem to want help. But that is the manner of the condition, because this individual does not know the extent that he or she has lost himself or herself. And therefore, the family members or even people who are surrounding this individual are the ones who are going to look into ways of how this individual can be provided with support. If one is schizophrenic, basically this is a person who is not going to agree that he or she is needing support or even has a problem. That means that we now need to know that we can get the person and take them to a doctor so that they can be attended to. Sometimes even doing it without their will is an alternative, because this is a person who is not going to take themselves for treatment. And therefore, depending on the type of mental condition, a person can be taken to a doctor willingly, or even when they are not willing to do that. And then after that, they are going to be explained to that they were taken to the doctor because they were not okay. So it's quite a challenge, because that is a manner of the illness or the sickness, but we know that this individual is requiring support, even if the individual is not feeling that they need the support.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor, for that. Dr. Karen Muturi, I can see your hand. You may unmute and speak.
Yes, thank you, Evangelist, and thank you, Professor, for that enlightened discussion. You mental illnesses, and one of the causes was brain changes because of hormonal imbalances. So my question is, at what point does someone know that they have hormonal imbalances? Is there a specific test that can detect hormonal imbalances?
Certainly, when one is seen by a doctor, the hormonal imbalances can be screened for, or one is going to be helped to appreciate that they are having hormonal imbalances because of the symptoms that they are presenting with. Because when you explain to the doctor will be able to identify this is a person who is going through hormonal imbalances and is requiring this kind of treatment. So it is by submitting these people to the clinicians that one can be detected that this individual is having hormonal imbalances. Yes, it can be detected.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. There's a question coming in, and someone is asking, of course, appreciating the session, saying it was resourceful, and they're asking whether their nutrition, their foods that enhance mental health. I don't know.
Certainly there are, but that is not my area of expertise. So there would be, it would be important to invite someone who is good in nutrition and treatment, so that the person can add value to this discourse that we are having. But yes.
All right, thank you. Someone has also written to me asking, how do you deal with anxiety disorder? And they're saying that they had an accident and a while ago, and therefore every time they're
right. Am I the one who is losing you, Evangelist?
Sorry, I hope you heard me, Prof. Someone is asking, they had an accident, and I think I've lost the message. Let me just read it again. How do you feel? How do you deal with anxiety disorder? For example, always thinking that I'll get an accident while driving. And of course, they're mentioning that they had an accident some time back.
Right. That is anxiety. That is the way it is presenting. But indeed, what the person is suffering from is trauma. Because when you go through an accident and that accident is shocking and overwhelming for you, then when you are remembering about it and you are reacting in a certain way because of that accident that you had some time ago, it is trauma. And therefore, what we go for as counseling psychologists is the treatment of the trauma. trauma has three aspects. Number one, going back to the experience, we call it re-experiencing, like the situation or the experience is happening in the now. And number two, you become very, very hypersensitive. In those situations, put in a situation like the one that traumatized you, you become very hypersensitive. And the number three thing is that you become preoccupied. All the time you're thinking about getting into an accident, even when there are no indicators that you're going to get into an accident, because of the fear and the anxiety you have. But the fear and anxiety is coming from the trauma incident that you went through. Now, at this time, we have to treat the post-traumatic stress disorders. We have to treat the stress disorders at this point that are coming from the trauma that you went through. If we target the trauma, the anxiety and the panic is going to be gone. But if we just treat the anxiety, we are going to lose sight that the underlying condition is actually trauma. That means it will continue recurring because we treated the symptom instead of treating the underlying condition, which is trauma.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor. Now, members, you agree with me the time is running out, but before we leave, we want our guests to respond to the last three questions that have been put on the chat section. So maybe you can respond to this. Would you recommend a youth abusing drugs to see a doctor or be taken to a rehab? And then there's another one asking that when the situation reaches depression, what is the recommendation? Should one seek any medical attention or should one just go for counseling sessions? And allow me also to read the other two. That was a nice lesson, Professor. Many a time we argue that almost fight with such individuals instead of helping the person for lack of knowledge. That is not a question, it's a comment from Elder Gachutha. Thank you. And another member is asking, it is a very informative discussion and the professor has enlightened us in a big way. Can violence and abuse be caused by mental disorders? Maybe we can respond to the first two as I look at the other three that are also coming. Karibu.
Thank you so much. And I can start with the last one. Can violence and abuse be caused by mental disorders? Yes. Because just like we said, if one is schizophrenic, then they are very delusional. They are not connecting in their mind very well. They are not being objective about situations. This may be an individual who is very negative. Everything that the individual is going through is looked at from a negative point of view or from a negative evaluation rather than from a positive evaluation. And that means that this individual can even start fighting other people in the homestead or even in the family, or even if this is a marriage that this is a person who can violate a spouse or who can be abusive of the spouse. Yes, mental health problems cause violation and cause abuse, whether it is within the marriage or within the family or within the community or wherever. The other thing is about drugs and depression. When one is taking drugs or when one is depressed, when can we know what intervention to use? What we do is that there has to be an assessment. Like, for example, this individual who is having depression, is it mild? Is it moderate? Or is it extreme? If it is extreme depression, that means that one is going to need a counseling psychologist and at the same time need a psychiatric doctor so that The person can be given medication and at the same time can be taken through counseling, but can only be taken through counseling when one is able to be objective. When one starts being objective and is more realistic, then this is an individual who can benefit from counseling and at the same time benefit from medication, because both of them, whether we are talking about depression or we are talking about addiction or dependency to drugs, both of them are medical conditions, or are conditions that are biological, and they are psychological, or they are mental, and they are emotional. And when they are physiological, they are going to require medication, because it's a biochemical situation that we are dealing with, and therefore it will require medication and at the same time require the support of a counseling psychologist. So assessment has to be done for us to know the level of that condition, for the right intervention to be given that is going to respond to the level that one is in terms of sickness.
Thank you, Professor. And more questions are still coming on, and we appreciate our members for responding so well. Someone is asking, how do you impress one in hallucinations as a result of substance abuse, but always in denial, even when all evidence is clearly visible? And someone is also asking, do children go through mental health? One has a private question, but we are also telling them we shall connect them with our guest speaker and other professionals that we have who can assist them in whatever area that they would need assistance. And I think those are the two questions that we have as we come close to an end.
Right? Do children go through mental health? Yes, children go through mental health challenges. We talked about conduct disorders. A child may have discipline issues that are extreme, or a child may also be withdrawing. Say, like a child has gone through like a physical beating from the caregiver, and this child is now withdrawing and not eating. A child who is not sleeping, that means that this child has a mental health problem now. So children go through mental health issues, even losing a very significant person in the family. That can be mom or dad, or even a sibling, or even a teacher, or someone else who is close to the child. This child can go through depression because of that. Because again, many a times we don't attend to the children and we don't help them to be able to process their grief effectively, meaning that then they have a lot of accumulated grief, and this accumulated grief is now transforming them and changing them and making them now to have behaviors that we cannot consider to be normal. Even their way of reasoning, that it has moved away from the normal, then we can say that child is having a mental health problem. And the preference of children having mental health problems, especially those who go through advanced experience, like even being sexually molested or even being beaten up violently and all that, those are children who can go through mental health struggles because of the experiences that they are going through. When one is having hallucinations, hallucinations is a symptom or even a sign that one may be having an underlying mental health issue or schizophrenic condition. And therefore, what we need to do is to address the challenges that one is going through. Is it a grief that one is going through? Is it a trauma trauma that one went through that require to be resolved. So when we deal with the underlying issues, even that hallucination or those hallucinations will start dissipating and coming down.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor. And we indeed appreciate the answering of the questions. And of course, we're also receiving many comments and appreciations coming from our members. And want to take this opportunity to appreciate you as I welcome back our parish minister to bring this session to an end and also for further announcements.
Thank you very much, Evangelist. Thank you, Prof. That was so wonderful. I think time was so short. And members, you can be sure that we can invite Professor again to take us through either part 2 or even another area. So, Prof, we want to thank you so much on behalf of our listeners and our present members and those after recording will receive this information. We are thankful on behalf of everyone. Number 2 is to say that next week is a special week. We shall have 2-in-1, where all men will go with the Reverend Doria to talk about man, culture, and Christianity. And then our ladies, all ladies, will go with our Helen Mushogu to talk about biblical womanhood. So we'll be having 2 lessons, so we shall come in, and then we'll be divided into 2. The technicians will do that. So please pray for the sessions. Continue walking through this journey. If you have other areas you'd want us to discuss, as Evangelist said, please do let us know, and then also talk to our counselors and people who can give you help. Thank you, Professor. I want now to close with a benediction, and then I'll ask us to just say good night as we exit. So my dearly beloved, I commend you to the hand of God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, He who is able to keep us strong even when there are many mental challenges around us and amongst us. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord give you peace. And may His blessing that passes all human understanding be with you both now and forevermore. We all say amen and amen. So you can say good night as you exit.
Thank you so much. Asanteni sana, Eunice Ng'ang'a, Naomi Wamboi, asanteni, Naomi Wanjiro, Beatrice Witi, naona nyote.
Good night, brethren.
We wish
God
you all
bless you.
the best. Asanteni sana.
Kwaheri, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. That was a good one.
Salimiana Kirigiti.
Oh, ni wa Kirigiti.
Good night and God bless.
Good night, Engineer Karaoke.
Higa twende tukalale.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.